Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Casey, and I'm serving as the director at OCBC. Just been a few months now. It's a great joy and a deep honor for us to welcome Venerable Roger Kunsang to Ocean of Compassion Buddhist Center. Venerable Roger became a monk in 1974 at the age of 26. And he's been at the heart of the Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition for over 50 years now. Since 1980, he served as the attendant and heart disciple of Lama Zopa Rinpoche with complete dedication, humility, and tireless devotion. Over those decades, Venerable Roger traveled the world with Rinpoche, supporting every aspect of his vast activity, from retreats and teachings to holy object projects, charitable works, and more. He was at Rinpoche's side day and night, quietly helping to bring Rinpoche's boundless compassion into tangible benefit for beings. He now serves as the CEO of FPMT, helping guide FPMT's global network of centers, projects, and services. For those of us here at OCBC who hold Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings at its very core, it is meaningful to welcome someone who has spent more than 4 decades living in the presence of Rinpoche's wisdom and compassion, someone who truly embodies Guru devotion in action. Please join me in offering a warm, heartfelt welcome to Venerable Roger Kunsang.
Roger, can we offer a short mandala first?
Sorry?
Can we offer a short mandala first?
Do you really need to do that? It's not a teaching.
That's auspicious time.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Oi sa jin po gi joy ji me do ram ri ra mi ji ni de gam ba di sa ge jin do me te o hai do go nam dai shin la jo ba jo gi dam guru ra nam mandala kanira tayami Sangye chodan sogi chodam la jangje bade dani kyabje chi dagi chanyen ge be sonam ki rola penje sangye ru pasho Sangye chodan sogi chodam la jangje bade dani kyabje chi dagi chanyen ge be sonam ki rola penje sangye ru pasho. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings.
Okay, good evening, everyone. There's probably a few details in that introduction that I should correct. Actually. Yeah. it was actually 1985 that I began with Rinpoche as his attendant. So just a correction there. Okay. So I'll start, but if anybody has a question, I'm happy to take questions. So my life started in Köpan, probably around 1973, 1974. I arrived there after being on the road for several years. And looking for something meaningful. Not unusual at all, especially in those days. And there was a meditation course. I think it was, at that time, it was the 6th meditation course, 1-month course at Köpan. And Rinpoche, of course, was leading that course. Prior to that, I'd been wandering for a long time. About 6 years I'd been travelling and looking for something. And so, without going into that story, I actually arrived in Rishikesh after coming overland from Europe, and so I was advised to go to Rishikesh to learn yoga and meditation, but there was no teacher at the ashram when I arrived. So people there at that time were suggesting that I go higher up into the mountains, into the Himalayas, and spend a little time with some of the yogis who were in retreat up there. So I did that, and I came across some very unusual yogis in different places. But I met one yogi in particular. He was in a cave. He'd been in this cave for about 23 years. And when I met him, he hadn't come out of that cave for many years. He had no food, no water, nothing. He was completely naked and long matted hair down to the ground. And he was just meditating. He was just in meditation. Oh, thank you. Anyway, so he was just in meditation. He'd been there for that amount of time, many, many years. And prior to that, he was an officer in the army. He was an engineer in the army, so he was an educated person. But he gave up. He said he renounced and went into meditation. So no food, no water, nothing. And so I've been trying to ask these yogis questions. And anyway, finally with his name was Tatwala Baba. He was actually quite well known. Anyway, I kept asking many questions, or not that many, but I kept asking questions. But he would give me a mantra, and I wasn't, which was, I guess, that was the way it was, but I wasn't satisfied with that. Anyway, I kept persisting, and then in the end, he said to me, he said, "Better for you, Buddhism." So then I went down the mountain because Buddhism wasn't up the mountain. So I went down the mountain, back down to the ashram, and then on this poster there was advertised two Tibetan Lamas teaching in Kathmandu, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So I went off to Kopan, and that's how I connected. So then I was, that first course with Rinpoche, it was a 1-month course. I had absolutely no idea of Buddhism. So it was a 1-month course, and the conditions were, in those days, very basic. We slept on straw in people's houses, and anyway, the conditions were very, primitive is a very good word. But nobody seemed to mind, because you could say it was like that course, maybe close to 300 sort of hippie-style people, right? So very relaxed, easygoing. But of course, amongst those people, there were, quite educated people, like doctors and other things, but they were they've set aside time to roam, which you could in those days. Anyway, toilets were dug in the ground, holes in the ground, and but everybody was focused in the tent with Rinpoche up there, young Rinpoche at that time. And so Rinpoche, it was the first time I heard somebody, I heard somebody talking to me about something I could relate to. And he was talking to me about, first, part of it was explaining the mind, which, for years I was battling with, trying to understand my own mind, how to control my own mind, how to deal with it, how to work with it. And I tried psychology, and nothing was telling me really anything. So for the first time I had somebody sitting there, and they were explaining about the mind. And and talking about it in a very, very practical way. I knew nothing about Buddhism, but Rinpoche was just telling me, 300 of us, nearly 300 of us, and it was just explaining self-cherishing, 8 worldly dharmas, 8 worldly dharmas, 8 worldly dharmas, 8 worldly dharmas. That's what we were getting, and it made too much sense, because it was just it was for the first time explaining exactly what was going on in my mind, right? In everybody's mind, right? So I was that 1 month. I just kept quiet to myself. I didn't speak the 1 month. Kept silence, because I really was interested in understanding what Rinpoche was saying. Of course, Rinpoche's English wasn't perfect in those days, but I understood every word. I wasn't unique, but some people had trouble with English, but some people not at all. So that was my introduction to Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And by the end of 1 month, I thought this was exactly what I need to do with my life. But I had, up to then, no interest in religion whatsoever. Nothing at all. Didn't enter my mind, or where I grew up, religion didn't exist. But it made so much sense anyway, so I was convinced this was it, but I didn't know anything about Buddhism, really, just this 1 month. So anyway, a few months after that course finished, the 1 month finished, it was interesting because I was very happy that the 1 month had finished. At least my self-cherishing mind, my 8 worldly dharmas, was very happy that I could, the 1 month was finished, and then I could go out and be happy. People, during the course, you would hear rumours of people sneaking out for cake in Boda, these sort of things, you know. But, and sneaking out's in those days, it meant a long walk through the fields to Boda, at least, or maybe further than that, actually. So then I decided that I would go back to Australia. I hadn't been back for many years, so I would go back there, earn a little money and come back to India, Nepal, and get more involved. But then I got a telephone call to say that Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe were going to Australia and going to give some courses there, in particular a 1 month course in up in Queensland, just like the 1 month course in Copan. But they asked if, prior to that, Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe wanted to do some retreat, private retreat. So they asked if I could rent a house or someplace where first Rinpoche could do retreat for a couple of weeks while Lama Yeshe taught, and then while Lama Yeshe did retreat, Rinpoche would do some teaching. And they asked if I could shop, cook, and look after the Lamas for both their retreats. So I said, okay. So the first one was Rinpoche's retreat. He was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks maybe, his retreat. And so I didn't, I'd been in Nepal, so I tried to, Rinpoche wasn't saying anything about what he would eat, and he was keeping silence. So I did the best with dal and rice and some sabji. Right? And then I remembered about Tibetan tea, so I used to make Tibetan tea in the morning for Rinpoche. After the retreat, I heard Rinpoche say to Lama Yeshe, Roger's cooking was okay, but the Tibetan tea was so salty. So salty. So I didn't, I thought Rinpoche could have told me during the retreat or something, but that's not Rinpoche's style anyway. So I heard it by the way afterwards. So anyway, after that, I asked Lama Yeshe's advice, and at this 1 month course, we did a 1 month Copan course in the bush, camping out. People were sleeping in the back of their car or in tents or whatever, and the Lamas were teaching from a tent. And that was next door to what became Chenrezig Institute, the first centre we had in FPMT. So at that time, during that time, I asked Lama Yeshe, during the retreat with Rinpoche, I was still trying to understand what Buddhism was, what Dharma was, but the thing that kept coming in my mind was every day it was there when I woke up, become a monk. I had no idea where this thought was coming from, and I had no idea what a monk's life was or what it meant at all. Anyway, I did, after that, for some reason I asked Lama Yeshe, should I become a monk? Before that, of course I knew that you had to, I was requesting advice, you had to make 3 prostrations and then, make the request, except I'd never made prostrations to anyone before. So Lama Yeshe was sitting there and I couldn't, prostrations I did that way. And then I came back and went and seen Lama Yeshe because I couldn't, just my ego was just prostrate down to somebody. I hadn't got there yet. Anyway, then I asked Lama Yeshe, he said, yeah, you go to Nepal and become a monk. So that's what I did. And so there was a few of us became ordained in those early days, and Lama Yeshe set it up so that we had, a good schedule. We were starting very early in the morning, around 4 or 5, 4:30, something like that in the morning with puja. Then we had study period, and then we had a sort of like a kind of a debate. It was more like question and answer. So that was what Lama Yeshe set up for us to do. There was maybe about 15 monks or nuns at that time, 15, maybe like that. And Lama Yeshe had it such that there was also a gegu, a disciplinarian. And and then we all had to serve each other. Take turns of cooking for each other, take turns of, taking turns of looking after the community. And then actually one day, one of the Sangha members didn't want to take their turn for cooking. And at that time we had a gegu. He was an American monk from Chicago. So he took the job very seriously, being gegu. So he went up to Lama Yeshe and he said to Lama Yeshe that one of the Sangha members, it's their turn to cook. And there wasn't much to cook because, it was in those days it was really quite poor. We had, basically it was toast and butter, if we had butter, and some tea for breakfast. So it was very, it was quite basic. So Lama Yeshe, Scott, the Gegu, explained to Lama Yeshe, this particular Sangha person didn't want to cook for the others. And Lama Yeshe said he just grabbed hold of his robes and he actually started to cry. He said, the meaning of this robes is to serve sentient beings. He said, he had tears in his eyes. So always remember that. It was really, I think, made quite an impression on the Sangha community when they heard the story. So anyway, now I'm going to jump several years. There's a lot of history in that first period in Kopan. So I'll mention something because it leads to the main part, just serving Rinpoche. So I ended up going to Sydney, Australia, and I was there. Okay, how does that make sense? We had a Dharma celebration. Lama Yeshe, I'm going back again. Lama Yeshe came up with the idea to have a Dharma celebration. What do you call the Dharma celebration? And that was where he would bring all the monks and nuns together, which at that time, now was 1980, so that time was close to 300 Western monks and nuns. And that was going to be the first period was going to be for like a month or more in Bugaya, and then another month in Dharamsala. And then Lama arranged these, the very important Lamas during those days, Song Rinpoche, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, of course, Song Rinpoche, some other Lamas. So it was really, he was creating a very significant occasion, teaching occasion. And then he drilled all the Sangha, the Western Sangha. He said, starting in Bugaya, when you move around, in a very disciplined fashion, and you dress very correctly, and you carry your choga, the yellow robe, with you all the time. He was very clear and very strict. And the reason was because at that time it was, we were all Westerners. There was no, in that beginning period, ordained. It was mainly Europeans, Australians, that kind of thing. And so Lama Yeshe's idea was the fact that, it's a very new experience to show up in India, foreigners, with robes on, right? And it's sort of strange or unusual, new, and especially for Tibetans. So Lama was, for the right motivation, right reasons, he was trying to make a good, clean, clear image. So Lama would instruct very clearly almost every day, how to walk, how to wear your robes, very strict. So we spent a month like that in attending teachings in Bulgaria, and then after that there was some break, and then 1 month in Dharamsala. So the same thing happened there, and then there was teachings also from His Holiness. So at the end of this 3 months, I think it ended up 3 months, there was, we offered a long life puja in Dharamsala at Tushita to Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe. So we had Rinpoche and Lama Yeshe sitting together on the throne. It was a bed, but it was the throne. And we did long life puja for both the Lamas. So when the long life puja finished, Lama Yeshe came up to his room, and for some reason I went in there also. Maybe Lama Yeshe had asked me. But he said that he was talking to me, and there was a couple of other people in the room, and he was explaining that he wanted to start a monastery in the West. And so he explained about Nalanda having a monastery and naming it Nalanda, and it could be in France. And so he said that he wanted Adrian Feldman, Dr. Adrian Feldman, now named Gyatso. He was ordained same time as me. He said to Gyatso, he said, you'll be the director, and Roger's going to get the money. For some reason, I always, for the Dharma celebration, I was the treasurer. So I don't know why I always ended up with. Okay. So then it was interesting because just at that time, Lama Yeshe was just there, and Rinpoche was in his room. And somebody came in and said to Lama Yeshe, there is one Geshe, and he's wanted to see you about something. And Lama immediately knew that the Geshe was looking for donations, right? Because things in those days, especially for the Tibetan monks and nuns, was quite difficult. So Lama Yeshe said, he looked around, where are the donations from the puja? the long life pujas that just come in. And I said, I think Rinpoche has them in his jola. He said, you go and get his jola immediately. So I raced out to next room or somewhere to get Rinpoche's jola because Lama's very practical. Lama Yeshe was a very practical person. So as soon as he heard that Geshe was looking for donations, he immediately wanted to know where the donations from the Long Life Puja were. And when he heard that they were with Rinpoche, he knew what would happen if the Geshe went in to see Rinpoche and asked for donation. So I had to race in and see Rinpoche and ask Rinpoche for his jola. And so Rinpoche's like that. He just gave me his jola, and I raced back, and the jola's empty. The Geshe'd already been in there, and everything Rinpoche just gave. And I said to Lama Yeshe, I said, the jola's here, and then Lama said, it's gone. And I said, yeah, it's gone. So that was sort of two very different lamas. Lama Yeshe was very practical, and he was very motivated to start an organisation. So anyway, so in the end, Gyatso, Dr. Adrian and I went to France, and the place that we had for the monastery was had just been bought because Vajrayogini Institute had just had a big fire, so they got insurance from the fire. So Lama Yeshe heard about that and asked them, can he have the insurance money to buy this old building for the monastery, for the new monastery? So they said, okay, of course. So Gyatso and I got there, and the building was very old, I don't know, a couple of 100 years or something. And when we went inside, it was grass growing. It was really, really needed a lot of work. It was actually grass growing all through the building. And so then I think we quickly had a meeting, the two of us, and decided if I'm going to get some money, I'm not going to get money here. So in the end, I went back to Australia for the first time for many years to see if I could raise funds. I don't know how, I didn't know. Anyway, and then Gyatso, Dr. Adrian, he stayed in Nalanda and to look after the place. So so then anyway, I spent some time in Australia, and then I got a call from Lama Yeshe to say, well, you're there, helping out with the finance. I was sending funds to Nalanda. He said, you're doing that, why don't you start a centre in your spare time? I thought, okay. So then Vajrayana started, which in Sydney, Australia. And after that started, then I did get a call. I got a call from Rinpoche. If I could come to Europe and help on the tour in Europe. He was about to start, I guess, his first major tour, 6 months in Europe. So I said, yes, of course I will come, but I have to get somebody to look after the centre while I'm away for 6 months. So anyway, that happened, and so I arrived in Amsterdam, and then met up with Rinpoche there, and so then my role was the attendant. That was the beginning of, I think, 1985. And up to then, I think I'd had a fairly unusual life. But what started then was really become, more unusual. So it's a little difficult to explain, but so I arrived, and then somebody, there was a nun who'd been travelling with Rinpoche, brought him to Europe. Her name is Yeshikadra, and so she handed me Rinpoche's jola. Said goodbye. So that was my introduction. I got Rinpoche's jola, and so I was to be the attendant. And then tomorrow was Manjushri initiation, Manjushri Jainam. So I have to prepare the tormas, and which is not much to do with Manjushri, but I had no idea. So I went to see Rinpoche, and this was the beginning of my life with Rinpoche, because Rinpoche is very, he's very different. And so, to start with, the Manjushri Jainang, I kind of figured out the tormas. It was but then came the actual Jainang, and of course, I didn't know how to, take the Gektor out, hold the Gektor up, and all these sort of things. So I kind of winged it and kept watching Rinpoche for instructions. Even making the Gektor was a little bit strange, but anyway, it worked out. And so a few days later, after that, then there was Vajragini initiation, that was a very difficult one. And that took, I think, 3 or 4 days and nights to get the torma together, and checking in with the Geshe, checking in with Rinpoche, going back and forward, trying to figure out all these things. And then the initiation actually happened, and of course, Rinpoche, just seems to always do all-night initiations, right? So they go right through the night, for several days, several nights. And for Rinpoche is, it seems like it's just completely normal. You go right through to breakfast, and it just seems completely normal, to do all night. So this was the beginning of the European tour, and the point was that what I quickly found out is, I was really with somebody who, this was really an ascetic yogi. He was, his life, his way of living, his way of being was very different to what we normally experience, right? And, by the time we got to Italy, and we were at Lama Zopa Institute, and I was a long way from figuring out my role, and I was no one because I was completely new on the job, and but I remember in Institute Lama Zopa, there Rinpoche was so busy, and he'd been so busy, and his hair was getting long because he just not interested. He was his prayers and practice would go all night, And in Italy, people were coming to see him 24 hours. He'd be eating breakfast or lunch. People would come in. It wasn't a problem for him. He did talk, answer questions, do observations while he was eating. And I even found somebody, 3 a.m. in the morning, somebody came through the window. 3 a.m. in the morning. I checked the time. It was a long time ago, but I remember. 3 a.m. they came through the window. Rinpoche didn't blink an eyelid. Of course, no problem. and just talking with the person, doing observations, that kind of thing. But at the same time, the interesting thing was nobody was telling me what my job was, including Rinpoche. You know, he didn't seem to be interested, actually. But I was, I knew I had to hang around and do what I could and figure out what the job was. And so that's the way it went. And we came, Italy, the end of the visit in Italy came, and everybody was excited to take Rinpoche off to the next place. And everybody jumped in the cars. There was three or four cars there. We jumped in the car and left. I was still there. And so then I actually hitched a ride to the next place, and then caught up with Rinpoche again, and then started to try and again figure out more what the job was. So what it's very hard to describe, but I mean, it was like, it became more clear to me gradually. It became more clear to me that Rinpoche was just, he really was a yogi, and he was definitely free of the 8 worldly dharmas. And there was no doubt about that. Nothing bothered him. There was no issue, no matter what happened. He just rolled with everything, right? I'd never ever experienced anything like that. There was no, over a period of time. Now I'm going to forget about other things, but just over the period of time, as time built, months passed, year passed, 2 years passed, I was really at a loss that how somebody could be like this. Nothing, and you go through some very complicated and difficult times, travelling and from one place to another place. Everything's new, everything's different, things are missing, that's happening. Flights to catch, this to catch, you nearly miss the flights and all these things. And just Rinpoche just sails through everything. There's just not the slightest thing ever, no sign of any kind of disturbance. For Rinpoche, it was not a problem. Problems for him didn't seem to exist. And he would, at night time, he'd have everything. You'd set up everything, so he had his prayers and his text, everything there in front of him, and he couldn't. One thing that there may have been some attached, you could not separate Rinpoche from his texts. There's no way. So he had all his texts set up, and over time, we were carrying 3 or 4 large suitcases full of texts, and 3 suitcases full of texts. One suitcase was just all ritual things, for initiations and things like that. And then he would have 1 spare set of robes. And every time we get to the airport, of course we're way overweight in negotiations, and then I say to Rinpoche, couldn't we just leave this behind, leave it? The first thing Rinpoche goes for his spare set of robes, he says, you throw them away. But you could never separate the text, So at night time, every night, Rinpoche, you sort of set Rinpoche up, make sure everything is there for him, and then he would just keep going through the night. he never went to bed. You know, in the 40 years that I attended Rinpoche, never once went to bed. You know, I mean, he never got into the bed. I mean, he was on the bed, you know, and he'd lean back in the bed, right, on the bed head. But it was meditation or prayers or doing something like his favourite time to work, which was quite difficult, especially for myself in the beginning. It was after midnight, you know. Excuse me. It seemed to be the favourite time to, you know, answer letters and things like that. And I was constantly falling asleep. And sometimes it'd be very, very difficult. I'd be on my hands and knees, changing positions and trying to write and trying to stay awake and listen to what Rinpoche said. But anyway, Rinpoche's style was somehow, it was quite amazing, yeah. Even, I mean, I can say this, that even for Tibetan Lamas, I think, you know, it's unusual. Let's see what else I've got in my notes. Okay.
You described that Rinpoche, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Rinpoche?
Yes.
Could not lay down in the bed and sleep. Did he sleep in an upright meditation? Did he close his eyes and fall asleep? Because it's humanly impossible not to get sleep, isn't it?
I agree with you. I agree with you, but this is somebody who's quite different. Yeah, it's quite different. So, of course, Rinpoche closed his eyes, but I really don't think he slept. You know, I don't think that happened. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but even, you know, when we go on planes, you know, Rinpoche would have an altar. Rinpoche would have an altar that... Anyway, when we get on a plane, yeah, I had to set up a little altar. There was certain deity that Rinpoche would travel with, put in front, and then certain texts and everything else. So even on the plane, you know, he'd be doing prayers or reading a text, and he'd have a particular deity there. So even travelling on trains, the same thing would happen. Even Rinpoche would do pujas on. We were travelling one time, I think travelling from Bodh to Delhi on a train. You know, we were travelling, I think, second class sleeper. So it was good, and it was full, and Rinpoche started doing Mo's, and then he said, I have to do puja. He said, right now, you had to do this puja. It was Tukchuma, sort of a little kind of a wrathful puja. So he said, you have to make the torma, and then we have to... I said, right, Rinpoche, I said, we're on the train. I have nothing to make. No, he said, must do. And anyway, I went up and down the train and tried to figure out. bread or something I was looking for. Anyway, I found a watermelon. I bought a watermelon. And because inside the watermelon is red and the torma had to be red. So then I peeled the watermelon and made this tukchuma torma from this watermelon. And, the train carriage was quite full. Of course, Indian people, right? And they were so interested. Because they knew, one, it was puja, so they were into that. And then there was this foreign monk carving some shape out of a watermelon, right? So then, anyway, then it got sort of done, sort of. Anyway, Rinpoche was okay with it, and then Rinpoche did this puja on the train, So that's how Rinpoche was, right? It's just, and Rinpoche never bothered him who was around or what was going on. If something had to be done, it got done. He had to do it. And even, it's not, what really amazed me is just it was around the clock. Rinpoche's mind would not move from thinking, even he couldn't actually directly benefit anybody, he was thinking about it, right? I don't think, after some years, I got so tired of asking Rinpoche, why don't you have a break, Rinpoche? Have a cup of tea. Even a cup of tea sometimes. And Rinpoche looked at me very strange, break, Anyway, at that time I thought, in my mind it just came very strongly, this is a bodhisattva's way of life, like the text, right? It just came out of me, just very strong. This is a bodhisattva's way of life. He has no thought for himself or interest in himself. He's completely free, 8 worldly dharmas. I'm absolutely convinced. No sign of that in being with him for so many years. And always so intent on thinking about others, and not just humans. So much time Rinpoche spent with animals, insects, ants, whatever. We have a retreat place up in Washington, and we have 2 monks there looking after the place, and Rinpoche came across an anthill, an anthill. So he started doing puja for the ants, and then also there is a text of how you can. I don't know if it's specifically for ants, but it seemed to fit. Anyway, doing these prayers or puja for the ants, and then in that puja you're blessing like it was sampa, roasted barley. But anyway, so Rinpoche used to make these lots of round balls of barley, bless the balls, and then offer to the ants on the anthill. So then when Rinpoche left, he gave the lineage to the 2 monks. We have 2 monks there, Tarchin and Tenzin. And so now they were left with a job every 2 weeks. I think every 2 weeks they have to make up these and do the prayers and everything else, and then go and feed the ants. This was a big anthill. Now there's, because that property is around 500 acres. You know how many anthills they have now? I forgot the last number, but it's, I think, more than 40 or 50 anthills, right? And so it's a big event that day, when it comes for doing puja and blessing all the food, making the food and everything for the ants. And And then, the very popular thing is animal liberation. I mean, that especially in Chinese tradition, animal liberation is a big thing. People put a lot of importance on that. So, of course, for Rinpoche, also animal liberation was really very important. And Rinpoche would always put effort in making sure whatever animals are being released are blessed, that there's some benefit. And then one time we were in Singapore, and so the Singaporeans have bought a lot of animals and fish and all sorts of things. They're really a lot. And so then the things that live on the ground, there was the ones that had to be released in the ocean, and then there's the ones that live on the ground. So we were in a little bit of forest area in Singapore, and so that was the place where you could liberate these animals. There was like snakes and mice or different things. So we were emptying out, and as we were doing this, Rinpoche was reciting mantra and trying to bless even at the last minute as they were let out of the sacks and disappeared into the forest. So there was one big sack I remember emptying, and there was this huge snake came out, but a little bit grogged. I think they probably doped or something while they're in captivity. Anyway, the snake came out slowly, a big one, and then somebody else was releasing mice. But the snake was still moving slow. Then Rinpoche freaked out, now you had this situation. It wasn't that the snake was going after mice, but Rinpoche realised we release them, but then they end up eating each other. So this really, really bothered Rinpoche. I mean, it was really a problem. He really was, he didn't know what to do with this, He said, what's the point then? We save them and then you release them and then they're eating each other. So that really got, he really got bothered about it, really worried, right? And then I don't remember, maybe it was a few days later, he came up with this idea. He said, okay, now we have to make the tradition that when all the animals that you're releasing, you bless them and everything else like that, right? But you've got to give them a chance to create merit because they're going to die. Of course they're going to die, but they die quickly, go into the ocean, somebody eats. It's like that, right? So Rinpoche came up with the fact that, the ritual of releasing animals, liberating animals, must include, once you save the animals, then you have to circumambulate around holy objects, right? So then the idea of, when you liberate animals, then you have to create an altar. And then part of the process is first taking them around the holy objects so that they create some merit before you release, right? So he really, tried to figure this out, and this is what he came up with, right? And so since then, when we liberate animals in the FPMT, we're supposed to first give the opportunity to create merit. And in some places, I remember we were in Taiwan when Rinpoche, not long after Rinpoche created this idea. So in Taiwan especially, liberating animals is a big deal. They do that a lot, right? So they prepared an animal liberation for Rinpoche, somewhere, I forget, in Taiwan. But 12 truckloads, the big tip-up trucks, big ones, 12 truckloads of sea animals. These trucks came along, 12 of them, full of water. They prepared full of water and all sorts of fish and different things in different trucks. And then they had this massive altar. And then the idea is 12 trucks was going around. So we had these 12 trucks rotating around. Took a while because it's a big circle with 12 trucks. And this big altar, and then all these sea animals, you know. It was quite amazing. Yeah.
Why were these creatures captured in the first place?
Well, they would be captured for commercial use.
Oh, to like consume them? Or to have
Not
them as
the
pets?
well, these, what usually happens is the Buddhist people go along to wherever the people catch all these things, right, and then buy them, often at the wharf, you know, right at the where the ships come in or the boats come in from
So they're
capturing.
alive.
They're alive, yeah. So those trucks are full of water with the animals, or the fish, or whatever it is in the water.
I see. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one of the sort of traditions that Rinpoche created for saving animals. But it doesn't end there, because Rinpoche also came up with all sorts of other things, that when you save animals, or particularly ants, small, Rinpoche had these little scoops. He had them made, look like a shovel, and on the top it is a Namgyalma mantra, and then other mantras around it, like that. So like for insects, you know, which are difficult to pick up off the ground, so you had a way, it was designed nicely, you know, so that you could, it was like a shovel, it had a top, sides, everything like that, and it had a flap like this, right? For those on camera. So, and then you could just gently scoop up, and then the ants or bugs or whatever it was that were probably dying or about to die or go inside. So inside, you know, one of the main things was the Namgyalma mantra on the top, not mantra, mandala on the top. So they would get this blessing, and there's all other mantras. So he had that designed and made, those sort of made, right? So then you can then easily, the animal's wounded or having a problem, you get them inside. Then there's a little thing, you close it shut, hold it shut, and then you do korwa. You go around a holy object or around the altar or something like that. So they, apart from being under the Namgyalma mantra, they're going around the altar. So that was, you know, that's how Rinpoche thinks, right? You know, just always working to figure out how he could help others, even insects or animals, whatever. What else do we have? There was one time in, this is a little bit different, but we had a interfaith meeting in Bulgaria at Root Institute, and so we had these religious leaders come, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama also came. This is going back some years when His Holiness could do those things. So His Holiness was, you know, in the Gompa, and then there were other religious leaders. So when the event finished, then Rinpoche went up to His Holiness, you know, to lead and lead away. But Rinpoche wanted to introduce the statues and what was on the altar. So Rinpoche was bringing His Holiness along the altar, explaining like this. And I was immediately behind His Holiness. Rinpoche was in front, just going along as Rinpoche introduced. And Rinpoche in His Holiness was talking in Tibetan, so I didn't understand anything. And then we came down to one side of the altar, and then Rinpoche introduced this statue in front, which was the statue of the Kadampa Lama Geshe Potawa. Potawa, you probably heard, right? Geshe Potawa. And then His Holiness said, didn't say in Tibetan, he said in English, "Oh, Rinpoche, this is your predecessor." And I thought, after I thought about that, because they've been speaking in Tibetan, then suddenly His Holiness said this in English, and he knew I was right behind him. So why was he suddenly changed? So that stuck in my mind. Yeah, it was very interesting, I think. Because Rinpoche's life, for sure, was exactly how the Kadampa, the great Kadampa Geshis, lived. Because Rinpoche, every detail of Dharma, you would not let Rinpoche would point out to anybody, and he would be careful. Even as you turn a page of a text, here you go. No. You can't do that. That's disrespectful to the Dharma, right? Even turning the page, and walking along, I see Rinpoche will stop. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Any kind of red cloth that's on the ground, or string, or something like that could be not necessarily robes, but somehow imitate or appear like that. He will always stop and pick it up, put it in a high place. So every detail of Dharma, just like you hear or read about the Kadampa Geshis, just he would always be so careful with, his life was, it was just, and of course, with holy objects, riding the Rinpoche was, for so many years, he himself was riding the Prajnaparamita in gold, right? Even as we travelled around, we had to carry this huge long text in its own special suitcase, sort of like a suitcase, which was the Prajnaparamita, which Rinpoche was riding in gold, pure gold, right? Which had to be carefully prepared. And then he would do that, of course, after midnight. That was his time for writing the Prajnaparamita. And so Rinpoche did that for some years until he had a stroke. And in the meantime, there's one Kopan monk who was with us in Aptos now. He's been writing every day, or almost every day, the Prajnaparamita in gold now, 22 years, I think, every day, well, more or less every day, now 22, 24 years. Prajnaparamita is not finished, but that's a lot of gold. But it's extremely, we're still doing that, we still keep it going. So there was one of Rinpoche's projects, writing the Prajnaparamita in gold. What else I was going to say? Interesting, I forgot everything I was supposed to say about Rinpoche's life. So many things, but well, maybe I'll tell another story. Was I've told this one before, but maybe, well, not in America anyway. But I think this was quite a few years ago. So Rinpoche and I were crossing the border from India to Nepal, and it was getting late, sort of becoming night, and I think we'd arrived at the border by bus, and then we went through the passport control, came into Nepal. Excuse me. And I thought we were going up to Kathmandu, and then Rinpoche said, "Let's get the bus." I said, "Let's get the bus where, Rinpoche?" And so Rinpoche, he suddenly took over and said, "This bus," and it was a bus, Nepalese bus. So I said, "Rinpoche, anyway, it didn't make any difference. Rinpoche wanted to get on the bus, right?" So I had the suitcases, and I think I had the two big ones at that time, and with the text, of course, and then a couple of hand luggage over there. And so anyway, we get on. Well, they went up on the roof of the bus, and then the bus was already very full, all the seats. But Rinpoche and I managed to get the drivers driving, and then on this side there's a seat like this, so Rinpoche and I squeezed in there. But the bus was completely full, if you've ever seen an Indian or Nepalese bus. And the fronts, there was no windscreen in the front for the driver or anybody, and it was just air coming through. So it was an open-aired bus. And so we took off. And I was trying to be respectful and polite with Rinpoche to find out where we were going, and Rinpoche wasn't saying anything. And so off we went, and we were on the Nepalese side going down this road, and occasionally we'd stop and people would get off, and mostly getting off, a few people getting on, and it became dark, and there's no lights whatsoever, just completely black, pitch black. And maybe we were going for a couple of hours, and then Rinpoche said to me, "Tell the driver to stop here." I said, "There's nothing here, Rinpoche. It's completely dark. There's nothing here, Rinpoche." And Rinpoche said, "No, here, stop." I said, "Okay." So I told the driver to stop, and the driver... Anyway, so he stopped the bus, and then we got out. I got the suitcases down. The bus went off. It's pitch black. Can't see anything. I said, "Rinpoche, where are we going?" And Rinpoche says, "I think it's this way." That was the last thing I wanted to hear. I think it's this way. If he said it is this way, it would be better for my mind. Anyway, so Rinpoche walked off the road into the bush. The bush, Australian term for forest, right? No path, nothing. Here comes Roger behind Rinpoche, and Rinpoche's off. And so we went completely into the bush, and then we came across a creek, so we had to go down the embankment, get across the small running creek, across the other side with the suitcase and everything, up the other side and into the bush again. I said, "Rinpoche, we're already lost, I said, "I have no idea how to go back." And Rinpoche said, "No, I think it's this way. I think it's this way." So we kept going off, and we're in the bush, right? Forest. And there's no road, no tracks, no nothing. And we went for some time, and then Rinpoche said, "There." And then right in the distance, it seemed like there was like a naked light bulb somewhere, just like that. So we headed towards there, and we came across a little village. And then Rinpoche said, "We'll go through here." And then we went through there, and then I think we must have come to the outskirts of what I think was Lumbini. And there was the the monastery there was we came to the monastery of Chogyam Rinpoche. No, yeah, Chogyam. No, not Sakyalama, yeah. Chogyam Rinpoche. Yeah, Chogyam Rinpoche, sorry. Anyway, we came across one. He was, I think, maybe he was the head of the Sakya tradition at that time. And so that's Rinpoche finally said to me, that's who he wanted to see. I thought it would be nice to know before. But these things go in your mind, it's not really relevant anymore. So anyway, so we went to the monastery, and the attendant said that His Holiness had already retired doing prayers, so we'd have to wait till the morning time. And Rinpoche said, fine, thank you. And then so they gave us a room to stay in for the night. It was a small room with 2 basic beds in the room. And so I set Rinpoche's bed up so that he had his prayers and everything else, and they had mosquito nets and everything because it's quite infested with mosquitoes. And then I sort of did my prayers, and then I went tried to quietly go to sleep while Rinpoche was sitting doing his prayers. Of course, he would continue through the night, and then I had to sort of go to bed. Anyway, so for some reason I woke. There we had mosquito nets. So I put the mosquito net. Rinpoche was sitting up. Excuse me. And then I woke up for some reason about 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, and Rinpoche had taken the mosquito net off, and he had a singlet on because it was very hot. So he lifted the singlet right up, and his back was completely covered with mosquitoes, and front. Like, I was sort of woke up and I was like shocked. I mean, it was really like completely back full of mosquitoes. So I just jumped up, sort of quite surprised, and went to try and Rinpoche said, no. He said, no. He said, Rinpoche, please, And then I'm thinking of, what could happen if, what some mosquito bites could lead to. And Rinpoche says, it's okay. It's okay. Each one just wants a little bit of blood, just a little bit for each, he said. So we had this conversation, which didn't go anywhere, of course. And so I kind of went back to bed. But I left there, Rinpoche there with the rest of the night with mosquitoes completely, and that was his offering to the mosquitoes, right? For the mosquitoes. But I found also another time in Tushita, I found that I was getting a bit suspicious what Rinpoche was. He was sitting on his bed and he had his table, and I was getting a little suspicious, but there was something going on that he didn't want me to know. So but I didn't know how to look there, But I did in the end because, just my curiosity got the better of me, and I was a bit worried. But Rinpoche had lice, but he was keeping the lice and he was feeding the lice. He had butter from his breakfast. He saved butter from his breakfast, and he was offering butter to the lice, and he was keeping the lice in around his waist there, and just looking after them. And soon after that, also there was cats. So Rinpoche would always have these cats around too. And then one morning, just after the lice bit, then there was some strange movement under the dugam. Rinpoche, there's a sort of a coat the monks wear during winter. It's like a dugam, what do you call it? Like a cape, but very warm one, right? So I said, Rinpoche, do you mind if I look? So underneath the dugam, sitting beside me, the mother cat had babies, 9 of them, I think, 6 or 9. So he had them there. They're just, I think, the night before or something like that. So because he was looking after the cat. Anyway, the mother, there was all the children. So all these children he was looking after. Anyway. So that's how Rinpoche was with sentient beings. Always thinking, taking care. Any questions? Oops.
So I'm wondering, the people that actually eat, are they vegetarians then?
Sorry?
The people that eat in this branch of Buddhism, are they vegetarian?
No, I think many are, but it's not necessarily. I think particularly Tibetans in Tibet more or less had to eat meat. And in the monasteries they're vegetarian, but I think some people do eat meat. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine some places in Tibet you probably could not grow any vegetables.
In Tibet, that's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Venerable. Could you tell about another time that Rinpoche was disturbed? Another time that Rinpoche was disturbed, like you told the story about the mouse and snake.
Yeah.
So if you have another time where he was disturbed about something, if you can recall something like that, thank you.
Well, the other thing that really was difficult for Rinpoche was, especially in India and Nepal, and in both places, but in Nepal, because Rinpoche was often in Nepal, that in Kathmandu you'd often come across butcher shops, right? Always plenty. They're outdoor sort of butcher shops, and there could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goats tied up. And so they're tied up at the butcher shop. So, the butcher will just go there, kill them, and then put them on the table, cut them up, and people buy, right? So that's very difficult. Rinpoche cannot go past a butcher shop without buying usually it's goats. And so we'd be forever stopping for goats, sometimes chickens, sometimes even birds. They're stopping, and then he'd say to me, or if there was a Tibetan with us or a Nepalese monk with us, to go out and negotiate to buy the goats. And then they would all come in the back of the car, the Jeep or whatever. And so then what happened gradually at Kopan Monastery, they started to have a place to look after the animals. The goats are very difficult because after 2 years, they easily get very sick and die. Usually, anyway. So we have a place at Kopan where animals are saved and kept. And then in more recent times, Kopan has bought a large area of land for animals because there's only, it ends up you have a lot of animals, right? So this is out near the border of Tibet and Nepal. It's a very large piece of land. And so it's not quite ready yet, but a lot of the animals that have been saved, mostly goats, because that's usually what are killed, Rinpoche made sure that they had a very nice house and place to stay and build a big stupa, big one, so that the person who's taking care of the animals would always do koa, and then there's always on tape recorder, there's chanting, mantras and things like that, so the animals hear. So the animals hear as much Dharma and taken around stupa to create merit, etc. like that. And they're kept until they die natural death. Some get sick, of course. So there was a lot of animals bought. But Rinpoche, you could not drive past the place. He could not go past a place with animals tied up waiting to be killed. Just no way you could do that. But at the bottom of Kopan Hill, there was one butcher. He had a shop and he always had goats. So Rinpoche got to know him. So he would often have a sort of gentle debate about him giving up his profession as a butcher. Rinpoche kept talking to him to try and persuade him to give up. And the Nepalese guy is a very nice guy. He said, but if I give up, I've got no livelihood. So that had Rinpoche stuck for a while, right? But, every time we would stop there and buy the animals, Rinpoche would engage him. So they became very good friends, very good friends. And Rinpoche would always talk. So one day Rinpoche found out he sold his shop. Exactly why we never really found out, but it could have been influence of Rinpoche. But he did sell his shop, and at the same time he sold his shop, he broke his leg. Somehow he had a fall and he broke his leg, so he couldn't do any work. So then Rinpoche started to sponsor him, contribute to him and his family, because Rinpoche was so appreciative of him stopping that kind of work. And then the bad luck of his leg, so he couldn't make an income, or it was very limited what he could do. So then Rinpoche would always you'd always have to send money down there. One of the monks would give money to and send him down there to sort of help him out. So that's just Rinpoche's way, like that.
Was Rinpoche hi was Rinpoche ever disturbed by human behavior? Humans.
Yeah. I think Rinpoche often gets disturbed. Wars go on, all those different types of activities, but it's not disturbed in the normal sense. It's like you get disturbed, you might get upset, you might get angry, you might, your mind goes negative. Never like that, I see. But I would say it's always like, it's a very sincere type of concern, I guess. Because no matter how bad somebody's doing something, I think for Rinpoche, he would see, you could see the bigger picture around the situation. And he'd always be thinking of, what could be done. Whether it be earthquakes or floods, there was always mantras and pujas that at least something could be done that could in some way help. If it was the elements out of control, then there was always pujas or prayers, mantras that could maybe do something, maybe help in some way. And I think that's where Rinpoche came up with, started to maybe make more of a connection with Ksitigaba, because Ksitigaba had some connection with helping when the elements get out of control, right? Something along those lines.
I was just wondering if there are any updates that you could share about Rinpoche's reincarnation, or like if there's a search party, or is it still classified?
No, not classified. I think that, the last we heard from His Holiness was that, was that Rinpoche he'd been reborn in Nepal. His Holiness said in Nepal, and that was the last message we got. But, we decided, we have a committee, sort of you could say a search committee, right? And so we decided it's still a bit early to look. And we checked that with His Holiness. His Holiness said, yes, still a bit early. Because I think main thing is that the child is very young, like a baby. Then ideally you want some sort of two-way kind of recognition, right? So the child would have to be a bit older, at an age where they could recognize in some way something. And I think traditionally they have different objects from the previous Lama that they present to the child. So that's one way. But there are other ways that, the child, if it's maybe 2 or 3 years or 4 years old, they could express something like that. There's quite a few stories of High Lamas in the past, even with the present 14th Dalai Lama, I think, where, when very young, the Dalai Lama was able to recognize, someone in the search party. So that's what we're waiting for. Yeah. Of course, there's a story in Rinpoche's previous life. He was actually, his reincarnation was born before he passed away. So the Laudo Lama, right, Rinpoche's previous incarnation, actually pointed out the child that he is.
Is that possible?
Well, it's very, if in the text it has like the first level bodhisattva, you can emanate 100 different bodies, right? Second level bodhisattva increases. So it's, first level bodhisattva, you can be in 100 bodies around the universe, or even in the same realm, I guess, right? So anyway, that happened. That's the story of the previous incarnation, anyway.
Venerable, is this one? Thank you, Venerable Roger. You said early on that you were trying to figure out what your role was. And I'm just curious, did you feel like you ever did find that?
No, I didn't. One time. Is that did you finish your question?
Well, I was going to say, now that you're the CEO of the foundation, how has that process informed what you're doing now?
Okay. So if I go back many years, there was one time, because if I can explain, when I became the attendant, so you don't get, there was no instructions at all, right? Nothing. So I gradually had to figure out what it is I do. So it was kind of straightforward. It was organic, but it was straightforward. You just keep helping what needs to be done. You just figure it out and you start doing it, right? But then you're on the road for you're on the road for many years, and then you got letters coming to Rinpoche, need replying, you need this and that, and people are asking questions, and you have to tell the next place that you're coming to prepare this and that, and there's going to be initiations, and you need this and that. So somebody has to do it. Somebody has to organise it. So that became the job, right? And so after 10 years with Rinpoche on the road continuously, we were in a taxi going from downtown Bangkok to the airport because we were in transit in Bangkok. So we had to spend one night. They give you a hotel. So we were in a taxi coming from the hotel back to the airport. And this is after 10 years. And I got the courage. I was sitting in the back seat with Rinpoche. Just Rinpoche there. I'm here. And I got the courage up. And I said to Rinpoche something like, Rinpoche, there's a lot going on now, with travelling, constantly travelling, and then I'm starting to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a bit more of this and a bit more of that and a bit more of this, and so the job is getting more and more, right? And Rinpoche's not saying anything, It's 10 years, right? 7 days a week. And I said, so I sort of tried to introduce the things that I'd sort of taken responsibility to do. And I thought it was, the responsibilities were building up bigger and bigger. And nobody's saying anything, especially Rinpoche. So I said to Rinpoche, I explained some things and I said, Rinpoche, you think it's okay I'm doing this? And Rinpoche said, yeah, okay. That's it. So then actually it's just a very interesting organic way to evolve, It's probably different to what most people experience, but I found it very, looking back, I found it's almost like the only way you could do when you're with somebody who's a real yogi. You have very organic situations, right? And anything can happen. I mean, literally anything can happen at any time of the night or day. Sometimes very strange things, like when you're dealing with spirits or harming people, or anything could happen. It did. Everything sort of happened, Sometimes when Rinpoche had to deal with somebody who's got spirit possession, very strange sometimes. We had, I'll give you an idea. We were in Taiwan one time, or many times, but they'd organised a Lam Rim retreat at one of the Chinese monasteries, right? And there was, I think Rinpoche had done some teaching and then he was going to give a major initiation in the monastery. So, what happened? Okay, so it was in the first couple of days of the preparation was happening, and there's a lot of ritual and other things going on, and there's maybe out there in the monastery attending, there could have been at least 300 people, all Taiwanese. I'm pretty sure it was many years ago, And it was near the completion. There's a few days it takes Rinpoche to do these big initiations. It can take up to a week sometimes. And so Rinpoche is sitting on the throne, and initiation is sort of in the beginning stage. And then suddenly one of the Chinese ladies who was in the audience near the back was on her stomach and coming like that up the altar, sort of like a snake on a stomach. And she somehow managed, was moving like this, and came right up to there, just bottom of the altar. And I sort of got up around there, knowing not knowing what to do, but sort of being ready. I don't know what for. And then this voice came out, not the lady's voice. Very strange voice emanated from the lady, right? And then Rinpoche started a conversation. So the conversation went something like, this spirit had taken over this woman's body, and was actually asking Rinpoche, was pleading with Rinpoche to be able to stay for the initiation. But Rinpoche was explaining back to them that, he's okay to do that, but what happened to the woman's mind, the woman, Rinpoche was worried about, because he was explaining to the spirit that the woman also wants to take the initiation. So you can't do this, right? So this conversation's going on with it's a very strange voice coming out of the woman's body. And then I realised what was going on. It was Rinpoche was negotiating a deal. He was saying, because it got down to where this spirit, this entity, was saying there was so many entities outside, right? Other forms, in space and around, and they could not come in because there'd been a protection set up around the Gompa, which is what the Lama does, right? Sets up a protection, and you can't, so that beings can't come in. So the entity had somehow managed to take over that body, probably before the body had come in, and was explaining that there were so many other entities that wanted some form of blessing, some ability to hear Dharma, and some form of blessing, And so, in one sense, it sounded like a bit like that entity was almost, pleading or negotiating to stay, but also saying there is others out there. So then, sort of the deal that Rinpoche negotiated was that entity had to leave the body and let the woman come back, right? And that entity then, Rinpoche would bless water, etc., everything, and then send somebody outside to sprinkle this water around for all the beings. Right? So that was the deal that was negotiated, right? So that the woman's body went back on its stomach and then went back to its place. The woman came back. But so that's one example. There are other examples where it can get pretty strange, where spirits take over bodies. There was another time with and these often it's more in the East that it happens, because I think West is not so open-minded. Yes, not so open-minded in that way anyway. But in East places like I think Taiwan, Malaysia also, there was a lot of harm that way. But one time we had one mother, father brought in Malaysia. Quite a few times things like this happened in Malaysia. One mother and father brought their young girl. She was 7 years old. I remember she was like 6 or 7 years old. And they explained to Rinpoche that there was a spirit kept trying to, they said, harm her and take over her body. And so they brought her to Rinpoche to do some prayers or puja. And Rinpoche said, okay. In that time, there was a lot, you can't say a lot. It wasn't unusual in that part of the world to have this kind of thing happening. So Rinpoche started to do some prayers, and then I was there, and then this girl, she's 6 or 7 years old, this very, very strange voice started to talk. And it wasn't a child's voice, it was a very older type of voice, very rough, very masculine. Absolutely no way that it would fit to that 7-year-old body, right? Very rough, very raspy voice started to come out, and then Rinpoche's discussion started. Again, it was sort of like Rinpoche was sort of talking, trying to convince the spirit to not harm, to leave the girl's body. And but this one seemed quite tough, and you could whatever was there was tough and very strong. And so the Rinpoche had asked the mother and father just to sit in the next room, and Rinpoche was talking to this spirit, and Rinpoche was trying to convince the spirit to take refuge, right? And the spirit wouldn't. And then Rinpoche said, which really shocked me, he said, if you don't take refuge, I'm going to beat you. I thought, what does this mean? And then this discussion got quite serious, and the spirit was, you could feel the spirit was very strong, and the voice was nothing like 7-year-old girl. It was a male, and it was old and very rough. And so Rinpoche said to me, get my shoe. Get Rinpoche's shoe. So I got Rinpoche's shoe. Rinpoche said to the spirit, if you don't leave the body, I'm going to beat you. He's going to beat you. Jesus. I looked at the shoe, I thought, this is not... and I was wondering what Rinpoche was up to. So the spirit wouldn't leave. Rinpoche said, beat the spirit. I said, Rinpoche, the spirit is, there's a 7-year-old girl, a little girl. I can't beat the girl, And so then this conversation going on between Rinpoche and me about Rinpoche is saying it's not the girl, and I'm saying the girl, but it's the body of a girl, Rinpoche. And Rinpoche saying, you stop thinking that way. So this conversation's going on. I thought, geez, how? And so I said to Rinpoche, do you think I could ask the parents to come in, and then get their permission to beat their child? I didn't know what else to do, because I could understand what Rinpoche was saying, but I could not for the life use the shoe on the child. So I went and got the parents to come in, and I explained to the parents in front of Rinpoche, I said, this is what Rinpoche is asking me to do. What do you think? And they were totally freaked out. They were really, really scared. They'd already, when they brought the child, they said immediately yes. for them it was immediately, yes, do it, if that's what Rinpoche says, because they could hear the voice, they knew, they completely accepted what was going on. So then Rinpoche said, warned the spirit again. He said, you have to leave, or otherwise I'm going to beat you. Gave the spirit another chance. I was praying. Anyway, spirit didn't leave. So Rinpoche said, beat the child. I thought, so I had the shoe, tap, tap, tap. You can't. You know, I could hear the voice, but how, the body's a child, So I'm tapping on the child, I mean, really pathetic. Really pathetic. And anyway, Rinpoche saying, beat harder. And this is very unlike Rinpoche, because he's so unlike that. But, here he is saying, beat harder, so a little bit harder. And Rinpoche's starting to be very strong and threatening the spirit, and then keep saying to me, beat harder, beat harder. And I started to get a bit hard, but, no way. Anyway, then the conversation went on, and in the end, Rinpoche got the spirit to take refuge. Rinpoche had his prayer book, on the top of the child's head. That was, I think, the last thing. It wasn't me with the slipper. It was, I think, Rinpoche had his prayer book, Lama Naljo, on the spirit's head, and had it forcing the spirit or the body down and saying, you need to take refuge. So in the end, the spirit took refuge, and then suddenly gone. And the child was there. So anyway, it was another situation. Pardon?
There's one more question online.
Yeah.
Did you ever feel like you failed to fulfill a request from Rinpoche?
Sorry?
Did you ever feel like you failed to fulfill a request from Rinpoche?
Failed to fulfill a request. I think I must have. I don't remember failing to fulfill the request, apart from maybe falling asleep doing my prayers many times. But I don't remember failing that way. Anyway, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing the stories. It must be really hard to be an attendant for Rinpoche, right? Like, he never sleeps, he's always working. Like, what made you stay as attendant for like a couple of decades?
Sorry?
What made you stay his attendant for like a couple of decades and serve him? 4 decades, yeah.
Yeah.
Many sleepless nights, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I would fall asleep in many different places, Often when we get off a plane and you go and stay in somebody's house and they'd offer you a meal, I'd be asleep at the table, having great difficulty keeping awake what to eat, But I don't know how that happened, how that worked, but yeah, it wasn't easy. It just, I think, I don't know. It was the connection was there. I don't know.
Venerable Roger, thank you so much for sharing these wonderful stories with us about Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, the beginnings of FPMT and your journey. We so appreciate you taking the time to be here and to share with us. Thank you so very much. Please come back and share more stories with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, so we'll do a photograph and then kata line. And yeah, that's the order before we call it a night. And thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. Huh? Oh, and dedication prayers, yeah. I think he needs sharing.
I thought we'd recite Rinpoche's long, quick return prayer. O sa jin bo gi jo shi me do tra mi ra blin ji ni de yan ba ni san ge shin du me te hu hai do go nam na shin la cho pa jo yi dang guru ra nam mandala kanura tayami. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by the numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all the sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FPMT organization. May it be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that has already been generated increase more and more. And then for the long life of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-fulfilling, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then for the swift return of Kyabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang fathers and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples.